But first, yesterday's Victorian state budget. Well, it's a shameless attack on business, property owners, private schools, and the fallout has continued today. And because the Andrews government is usually a model for Labor everywhere around the country, well, this is a grim foretaste of what might happen in other states across the Federation. Because it can't stop its spending, the Andrews government is effectively broke. But rather than change, it's hitting the most productive people and punishing aspiration so it can keep on bribing key constituencies. The extraordinary thing about this budget is that despite all the new taxes, it actually doesn't tackle debt. Debt's expected to hit $170 billion with an interest bill that'll rise to $8 billion a year. Now, $8 billion, that's eight new hospitals, dozens and dozens of new schools, potholes fixed across the state, and Lord knows Victoria needs that. Typically, the government describes most of these new taxes as temporary, as if any Labor tax is ever lifted. There's $4 billion of new taxes on business via higher payroll taxes that'll penalise businesses for having jobs in Victoria, so guess what? They'll likely just move them interstate or overseas. There's $5 billion of new taxes on landholders to hit nearly 1 million Victorians who own a property other than the family home. On average, $1,300 a year. Now, ordinary people here, we're not talking about the top end of town, they routinely put their investments into trusts. These are mum and dad investors. There's over $400 million in new taxes on 110 private schools. That works out to be about $1 million per school on average, meaning parents will be hit with higher fees. And for all the pre-budget talk of cutting back a very bloated public service, well, the budget papers show that the government's wages bill continues to spiral. That bill is now 30% higher than it was expected to be just 4 years ago. And in any event, these aren't real job cuts. This public service attrition that normally happens, well, that'll take care of what he promised. And I guarantee you, everything else will be mopped up with consultants, which Labor love, including their pollsters. As you know, you'll be paying for it. And in a big cave-in too to the Green Left, the Andrews government will immediately halt all logging in native forests. Now, one consequence of this will be the closure of Australia's last white paper mill at Maryvale in the Latrobe Valley, meaning that we'll have to import paper from his mates in China, you guessed it, even though timber is a renewable resource and the Victorian forests were among the world's best managed. And instead of being productively employed, 500 plus timber workers will now be subsidised into retirement or put onto welfare or back on jobs where government handouts are already at a high in a region where energy has been shut down. This is Latrobe Valley. Now, in response, the opposition leader has said that Victorians are being punished for the government's incompetence. That's true, but Victorians are also being punished for the opposition's incompetence because it's failed to lay a glove on the Andrews government for the past 8.5 years, preferring instead to fight amongst themselves. By imposing some of the world's harshest COVID lockdowns, Daniel Andrews basically took away 2 years of our lives and in the process impoverished this state. Now, expected, he wants all Victorians not just to thank him for that, but to pay for his mistakes.